Race Remix.
Welcome to Race Remix, where we explore the intersections of racial justice and the arts. We talk with artists, educators, and thought leaders from around the world, building knowledge one conversation at a time. This podcast is produced by the Racial Justice Studio, an initiative of Arizona Arts at the University of Arizona.
Welcome to Race Remix. I'm your host, Amy Cray. My co-host today is Dwayne Cyrus, the director of the School of Dance at the University of Arizona. Hi there, Cyrus.
Hi, Amy. Thank you for having me. I'm here with Kayla Farrish, a multifaceted artist whose work includes projects and collaborations that combine filmmaking, storytelling, dance theater performance, and sound score. Welcome, Kayla.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. I think this is such an important piece that can be really inspiring to people having this podcast.
Well, we're thrilled that you're here. And I want to start by letting our listeners know that you are an amazingly accomplished choreographer and performer, multimedia artist. Can you just give us a little bit of your story about when you started dancing?
Sure. I started dancing. I think of my inspiration as my father, actually. He danced recreationally after college and was my first dance teacher with my sister and I. And I remember so always having music and dance in the family and expression. And I remember at a young age, just always wanting to create. And that would be, I'd be making the dances. I would be writing stories. I would be imagining myself in music videos, all of the above. And that just kept building, but it felt like a really strong creative force, including even with dance forms themselves, mixing modern ballet, jazz, improvisation, whatever I could come across. I was just fascinated.
So did you take dance classes as a young child?
Yes. I took dance classes both at studio, at public school. I'm from North Carolina. So there's the American Dance Festival there, which happens every summer. What's really exciting is this flood of different scenes. So working with my dad, or dancing with my dad, not even thinking about working. I'm dancing at the church. So here's liturgical praise dance. And then at the dance studio, here's these different specific forms: jazz dance, modern dance, ballet. And then at the festival or these public schools, I oddly got a lot of postmodern dance and partnering. I never went in one direction.
It's great to hear you speak about how movement was a part of your youth, you're growing up, and then you turned that into a career. That's exciting. So what I also understand about your dancing and the work that you make is that your work deals with themes of race and racialization in America. But for some newcomers, as well as longtime dance patrons, they might ask, well, what's race got to do with it? What's the connection between dance and race for you?
Yeah. Quite honestly, I knew, if we're talking about from these roots, I knew I wanted to choreograph and create. And I think what surprised me in finding my voice was how much I was drawn to seeing my identity once in these real life, within real life situations, within living. I was it became really important for me to see my identity. And then also it surprised me how the work became socio-political. And in saying that, I wanted to be able to give visibility, give experience, give truth into seeing my identity and the folks around me who are my collaborators, who are my family.
We're such a visual culture, right? These days we are really visual in terms of social media, films and television, video, and it's interesting that as a moving artist, like a three-dimensional visual artist, is what we could say, dealing with time and movement, you are also working with film and photography. And I think that that's really interesting because somehow that seems to harken back to your youth and the imagery of your youth. And then when you say identity, what do you mean? What do you mean by identity?
Oh yeah, no, I'll break it down. I think so identity, I think there is like a visual aspect, like what you're saying. There's like importance of like visibility. And then what I also feel really important is feeling and experiencing. And that like creating spaces for both that visibility and for seeing like what our true experiences are, not being hidden by media, not being hidden by rewritten histories, not being suppressed. Like if we really got to share how this world makes us feel or what we would hope for, or just like a different fantasy or imagination of our lives, what could that like look like? I'm like interested in creating those spaces. And I think it does build empathy, and it builds an understanding of things that are unseen.
I'm hearing from you like not only the experience of seeing, but the experience of being seen and creating spaces as an artist. I think, does our society really think about those things when they're thinking about art? You know what I mean? And so here you are creating these works and telling stories connected to race and identity, but it doesn't sound like you're only saying, see my story and that's it, and then you leave us. It sounds like you're creating a space for people to consider how they are seeing and how they're being seen.
Yes.
Is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah. And I wanted to add on to, for what I'm doing with my identity, which I think is expansive. I identify as a Black woman from the South, and knowing also that my father's family history is like from sharecroppers, and also that our lineage is cut off and lost within America. So knowing that enslavement is a major part of where we are today. For me, the erasure, it's like the erasure is really harsh. The reduction of like how I am perceived or what I can do, different power dynamics that I'm always like going up against, even when I don't want to. The film, photography, sound score, writing, movement. So both live performance and film can provide ways to like experience these stories together.
You're using different forms to create imagery and tell stories. So how is it different then? So you're doing live dance, you make live dance performances, but then you also deal with cinema or photography or even sound scores. How are they different? What impact do you feel those have for the audience?
When I create, I'm often thinking about where it's like this starting content or a starting question, prompt, and content where I'm like, where do I want to dig in farther? And then I'll visualize it. Either like sometimes how I visualize it is like, oh, it needs to be this like movement expression. I should say film. I was really interested in film and music because of people's ability to, like, everyone listens to music. They watch movies, and their ability to be transported and their willingness to like go with these like characters and these stories. And I wanted to feel that in live performance as well, and also theater. And I do think that happens with dance, but sometimes, like with our internal monologue or internal story, maybe they don't always get to go on that ride. So I was just trying to think about how these things speak and what they can do for the audience is, I feel like the film and imagery, we get to like see the person. And that was so incredible to actually be seen how was hoping to be seen.
Yes, yes. It's interesting.
Community.
Somebody said to me that dancing is a moving of souls. And when I think about that, it is also visual, but it's audible. And I love photography as well. And so I
Yes.
go, well, what's the difference between photography and dance? And I feel like photography captures one moment that maybe is not even the real moment, right? Like you never see life in one frame at a time. But dance, it's moving, and something about that is maybe more, I don't want to get corny, but more spiritual than,
Yeah.
and how are you speaking? Through what sensory device are you speaking to people? So music speaks to us through our ears, photography or visual art through our eyes, but dance, it's maybe more total. I don't know.
It's like they do different things. So sometimes I use sound score actually as layering. I'm like realizing how much I'm just trying to plug into meaning. So kind of like a mixtape where it'll be like, here's this like current sound, but also I'm sampling from 50 years ago. And also I'm going to pull this text from like James Baldwin. Ga, 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 ga. And then you can suddenly see the references and the ties to each other that maybe if I was listening to just this one part, I wouldn't have understood. And so, yeah, I'm like interested in the layering of meaning. So I'm like, okay, maybe watching this person I feel spiritually connected to, but I don't understand like how we got here. I feel like I can pull like through these different mediums, parts of the past and into the future.
Amy, I want to say something about, because I love how you're talking about layering, but blackness is not monolithic, and it is multi-layered. There's all kinds of blacknesses in our world, and somehow in our society, I know you were also a student of Africana studies while you were at the University of Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
But the point I'm getting to is blackness lives in our society as a spectacle. Often it is perceived as it's seen. We see from minstrelsy to sports, the bodies that we see in sports, to social media now. And I often feel like that is never the truth of blackness. It is a monolithic, homogenized representation of blackness that we didn't create. But then there are these people, because I just heard you say James Baldwin, or you referenced James Baldwin earlier, and I think about these people that may speak truths to you. Can you talk a little bit about those people and why they speak truth to you?
Yeah. We are not a monolith. It's so true. I'm really drawn to James Baldwin, specifically The Fire Next Time. It felt like the first time I could read someone like articulating how I feel about, and again, not a monolithic declarative statement, but like, I guess how I felt about history into my current time. And it was just hard to be able to articulate the grief, the rage, like violence, suppression, navigating, deciding to push forward anyway, rebellion. I felt like he could speak to that throughout time. I was really drawn to also bell hooks, killing rage, ending racism. Just felt like it made use of our feelings where it's like, oh, you're not allowed to feel angry. You're not allowed to hold, don't stay in grief too long. Like if I wasn't, where I was raised in the church, like, oh, just like, this is another way to deal with it. Just like give it away and try to just be joyful. Like, I guess coming back to earlier, where are the spaces where I can process and feel, and how can these feelings actually be like arrows? Like I can use them to make change.
As you're responding to Cyrus's questions, you're speaking with your body. I don't know if you know that.
I saw that,
but you
right.
are very much speaking with your body and pulling the bow back. But you also use language, much like bell hooks and James Baldwin. So, will you read this line of a poem that you wrote?
I've got swing low, sweet chariot on my mind. and ancestors breaking their backs, creating magic out of hopelessness, turning soil into a nation.
When did you compose these words?
Ooh. So actually, I was putting together some of my initial pieces, Black Body Sonata, which is a duet that talks about police brutality, but also talks about what it is to like navigate, our different mannerisms of having to navigate and survive. I shouldn't say mannerisms, behaviors as Black folks in predominantly white spaces, and how we navigate and manage that, and then getting to see our real responses to the constant deaths. And then with Grit from Grace was originally a solo that I did that I just wanted to see myself at my fullest power. I was like, what does that feel like? And power became many definitions, and then it became a quartet that I wanted to open that up to women and feminism, and feeling empowered in different ways. And I put together this work, The New Frontier, which was both of my first like massive film. I'm laughing because it was everything that could go wrong went wrong, but that's okay. there was art in there, but I was learning how to produce that. And then it became also a live performance work at Dance Space in New York. And they actually just wanted it to be a multi-piece work. But I wanted to imagine, what if Indigenous folks, BIPOC folks, historically excluded folks got to find this frontier of America, which did happen. But I was just trying to imagine like what would this look like without the exploitation, without so many things.
You make me think of Octavia Butler for some reason.
Yes.
Just how you're imagining other futures or other pasts actually could be also interesting. And something about that made me think of Octavia Butler.
Yes, actually, that's when I was making this work and my last two, Martyrs Fiction and Put Away the Fire Deer, which is my next work. I was recommended to read magical realism. So I was mostly reading like these historical books on poetry. I love Audre Lorde as well. I didn't say that earlier. But they're like, there's something about magical realism, both in Latin America and like Octavia Butler and Toni Morrison. Giving you, I really am interested in radical imagination. And this, I love this poem. Well, at the end of this total work, we've navigated through this quartet and duet and playing with different ideas of power and history. And at the end, there's one person becomes the reporter, and they're just telling us all the news events. But it started first with what headlines have happened under the Trump administration? It could be both imaginative or real. And what was scary as we were saying these headlines, even if they were imaginative, they weren't very far from the truth. And so it was like this high impact, and also trying again to play into the erasure and things that have been happening and create it into satire. So it's just this reporter is ridiculously cracking. And then this person comes out at the end and is reading this poem, which I was inspired by James Baldwin actually. And then finding my own words to, it's pulling a lot. Swing low, sweet chariot. Swing low, sweet. That's a song that's been there forever. And then just imagining turning the trauma that enslaved folks have lived in, breaking their backs, creating magic out of hopelessness, turning soil into a nation, such a powerful image, while also saying we're still here. You can't change this, you can't alter it. This is what happened, but we're still here. So yeah.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home.
You've said, and I quote, "I aim to hold a mirror to the society we form and participate in." What is it that you are doing as a dancer to create that mirror?
I was combining at first like really images of humanism, things that might feel like they feel very honest and are vulnerable. So having like human movement, human gestures, relationships between people, even building up the space and the set in a certain way of like places that we recognize.
So you're using like the set, the physical props and placement of physical things that you choose to bring onto the stage with you.
Yeah, like a chair, like a certain light fixture, like the things that I'm like, oh, these are already in our daily lives. I take out that some of that like imaginative work, so you can see what I'm engaging with, or see kind of like the photography or the cinema, like where am I? Who is this person? And yeah, physically, I think there's also a part with text, as text, speaking, dialogue, monologue. That's I feel like speaking has been a helpful tool, but also I've always been interested also in sharing what I'm feeling on stage. So speaking is another way to give more context. And then movement wise, being like really deep in improvisation or play and creativity, I'm really curious about like how those, like what do those feelings, like what does anger look like, and like actually seeing how does that move through the body, and now what's that in relationship to someone else. What does like grief look like?
I had the pleasure of watching you, Kayla, set up the audition for the students that are going to perform a work this semester. And that was really interesting in terms of this question that Amy asks about holding up a mirror to society. You started I'll try to describe it, what I saw. You had all the dancers in the space, and you prompted them through improvisation that helped them to engage with each other. It wasn't about structured lines and everyone trying to do the same move with the concept of perfection. What looked like a mirror to me was the fact that they were making choices about how they were going to be in the space, and they were responding to the other people in the space. And when we look at each other, we are reflections of each other. That's a mirror, right? And so it seemed like that was the doorway that you brought our School of Dance students through, was a doorway of reflection or a mirror. That's what I saw.
Yeah, an intention. It's like, what is your intention within whatever movement that you're doing? Like you can see it. And another way I'm trying to show this mirror reflection is to show, okay, what is our current experience? It's like one way, like having space to exist and be seen. The radical imagination was another way of like, I'm going to try on a role that doesn't belong to me, or didn't get to inherit, or I'm going to do what I'm not supposed to. I'm going to erupt. To me, it feels like liberation or transformation. You get spaces to experience something else, and in discussing like these experiences, these current experiences or future experiences and history, that ends up being a reflection of what's happening.
What are you working on right now?
Wow, I feel like I have to describe everything. I'm working on a new full-length work called Put Away the Fire, Dear. And it's my first venture into combining my love for cinema and live performance. And what I mean by that is I am breaking down these characters and archetypes in the 1930s to 60s. There are the archetypes of mammy, archetypes of like still some cooning, meaning I'm looking at the reduction of some of BIPOC characters. Sometimes they're placed into like servants, the entertainer, just reduced archetypes. And in researching and reading about them, they literally are written into the story without full narratives. The writer was like, oh, like I'll get Bojangles into here for this like dance scene, but without like outside of that, they don't really exist.
So do you see those archetypes? Do you see in any way those archetypes echoing through time to this day? Like, what do you think about what has happened to those archetypes?
Whoa. That's a great question. I mean, I saw the reflection, or I see the reflection of history where history is fragmented. I'll speak as for like what I feel my history as an African American feels very fragmented. It feels like, whatever I can gather and piece together, and there's missing holes in the lineage. So when I like see characters with missing storylines, I'm like, where do they go after? Like the entertainer maybe now is like the spectacle of like an athlete, or be the singer, but we don't want to like hear you talk about politics, Nina. We don't want that. Yeah, I wonder how that echoes.
It's so interesting that musically you shared information with us earlier. You mentioned Nina Simone and Sam Cooke. I'm like, wow, those two, really? And I just think about so much what Nina Simone, the great Nina Simone, went through in her life, and she had so much to say. And I wonder what your thoughts are about what's left. Like what is left when history discusses Nina Simone? Is it her message or is it her trauma?
I see and feel her message. I can it feels spiritual through the movement, like the music, and it moves me. And I think that it feels like it echoes forever. I feel sad about her trauma. Yeah, it just makes me sad that such an incredible artist, they're such an incredible artist and human, and they're giving so much. I was like, they don't deserve that. No one does. I was like, they don't deserve that. All their
For what
effort.
she contributed to our society,
Yeah.
yes, our culture. And so then it gives me the thought, you've already touched on it, but as a Black woman, I think of our musical artists, and can I say Whitney right now? And, the traumas of Billie Holiday, if you're talking about the 30s through the 60s, Billie Holiday. And so what I'm trying to get to is this question of, as a Black woman, creating art in New York City or in America, beyond the trauma, where are the impacts that you feel you are having?
And just starting to make these honest works, it felt like rebellion. and it's like, I think I'm unpacking it slowly over time. Like even making the work Black Body Sonata and The New Frontier. My parents came to watch those shows, and I just remember in them trying to protect me, they're like, oh, we don't normally, yes, we have this impact of like these things happening to us, but we don't talk about them because we don't want to make other people uncomfortable or to have a consequence by sharing our experiences. And I feel fortunate in this like time that I can. I'm not saying there aren't, like sometimes I've had people like get up and leave in a show. Or some other workplaces like we want to have the change in diversity, but we don't want to have the conversations about like why someone might be not comfortable to come into that space. And talking about the racial reckoning in 2020, seeing George Floyd, seeing Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, it felt hopeful that people were making space, but it also felt, I just got met actually with a lot of, like I'd get into a room and then I would be met with a lot of resistance of like, we'll only go this far, or we don't really want to change our language to be more truthful about what's happening. Like we want it to be like more flowery and I don't know, like just change the tone. And then also, just and getting farther along, like getting more people into different art spaces, trying to change casting and who can be what character.
How is that changing casting?
I think it's becoming more expansive. In that specific situation, I was explaining how some Black folks or BIPOC folks may not have a lot of access to play, to express, in a society that is telling us to suppress, or we have to come into the room and succeed. Like we need to do well. It's important so you can navigate this world. Like you can't be in between. You can't fail. So trying to explain that for casting, I was like, can we give more tools or room so people know that they can come in more as themselves, or that they can play around as like in the audition, like what's your choice? Can it be maybe a little bit messier and you're still going to get the job? So I feel like there's like the understanding that the lens of like how what we're seeing for art needs to change. But I still feel the resistance I feel is like, okay, let's get into the nitty gritty of like these conversations. Like, what does this mean? What are people experiencing? How can we expand? What are like, where are areas that we're not doing well in, and like being honest about that. Yeah.
You talked about sometimes in presenting and creating your work that doesn't always have to do with the traumas of Blackness. You talked about the space for Blackness, the imagination for Blackness, and the not having to be Black about Blackness. How about that? Like you could just make work and it doesn't have to have Black put on it all the time. So I hear you talking about that. And the tropes and archetypes that echo through history, through time. When I think about what must it be like for you to get the funding, the resources, the space to make live performance work, do you also feel a push toward having to make work a certain way? Or what do you feel in terms of what you want to make and what the resources, the funders, the opportunities are wanting to see from you?
As far as like what I want to make, I think I follow like the questions, the desire of like the projects that I envision. So I feel fortunate in that regard. And I think because I do dream big, that is helpful for like grants or opportunities. Because it's a new idea, a new take. What I feel pressure about resources, for sure. That it feels like, you take this big vision and then like how to do it with whatever is here. I do think that helped build community, like asking for help. Who can help me on the way? I feel pressure about the opportunities sometimes, and I'm working on this. I think in my like survival, I'm like, okay, you only get these opportunities so often. We have to do well. We have to, or this needs to come to the fullest thing. And realizing like that, like I want to be able to keep going. I want to have this momentum. And I think as a BIPOC person and survival, there's, sadly sometimes a mentality for me. I'm like, how long can this last? Like how sustainable can this be? Am I like, this is my only opportunity? And I'm really trying to work on that mindset of like, why can't there be more for you? If you can create this space, why can't there be more beyond this? Just undoing that and continuing to return to play and failure. Like that is my role as an artist.
What advice do you have for dancers, performers, artists, anyone who has a radical imagination, who wants to put work in the world?
I think do it anyway. I was like, do it. As much as fear or doubt or things can come in, I feel like my vision's always stronger. And reading Audre Lorde, Your Silence Will Not Protect You. For her, she just talks about she could live and just like, silence these ideas or put them away. Or she could just speak them to truth in existence. And for her, it was like the same outcomes or consequences. And I know that just really resonated with me. And I was like, I think I'm going to, whether I wanted to like change how I'm doing these things, I think I'm going to do this vision regardless. Like I'm not someone else. I'm not, this is my voice. So just trying to like listen and protect myself or celebrate myself where I can. do it anyway.
Can you tell us a little bit? I know you're just at the first week of making it, but can you tell us a little bit about the work that you're creating here at the School of Dance?
Yeah, I'm seeing like characters and environments, and in choosing this cast, they're all so unique. Like they're individually so fascinating, and they feel like they each have like stories within them. And so I'm kind of following that within building this piece. And like the beginning that we're just working with right now, I'm calling The Wanderer. And they feel like they've been navigating this like darkness or dark environment for a long time. And instead of being like squashed by their environment or, or defeated, I'm just curious maybe even about that like line, like not all who wander are lost. Like what are their like magics? What's their magical crafts? Like, is it to like, be able to yield something that isn't there? Is it the ability to follow their curiosity, even though they can't see what's in front of them? And I'm curious about taking that, like pushing them to new, like to do different dynamics, and then also bringing them into like more community and supporting one another. Like I see the character's environment, but it feels like a piece on like allowing like trust with yourself and trust with a group.
It sounds like their experience is a very important part of the fabric of the work.
Yes.
Can you say why?
I mean, I always make with who's in the room in mind. And they're incredibly gifted artists. So I feel like, they could execute the step, they could do the dance, but it's important for me to like see them. And even in giving like specific prompts, I'm like, okay, now what's your take on that? Like, what's your voice? What does this make you feel? Because I want to build a piece that they can like journey through.
It's so interesting because choice feels like, I would imagine, when you take away someone's right for something, you've taken away their choice.
Yes.
And as artists, especially live performing artists, I always believe one of the greatest freedoms we have is choice. You're on stage, whatever the director said, you want to do it, but you have to choose to do it. And like, on what timing will you do it? So that's a choice. In improvisation, it's a choice. And what would you say about how does choice for you connect to racial justice, for example?
I mean, just like, what we're fighting for the rights to exist, the rights to live, the rights to make change. It feels like I'm trying to like give that to each person from inside out. And like, whether it's with this piece or the other works I'm doing, I've like thought a lot about how much it changes me. It changes like what I think is possible for myself. And then I see like my collaborators and they expand, which is very exciting. And then we take that to an audience, whether that's in a theater space or putting it into a film so it can reach more people, or doing a workshop and just talking. I feel like survival feeds that we need to like stay in these parameters. But if there's a way to kind of crack that open to maybe question if we can change our circumstances, whether that's on our own or together as a community.
It seems like you've done that with breaking free of traditional dance training within a particular discipline. I mean, you're well beyond any particular style or discipline of dance. You're already going beyond the boundaries of what was and what's the standard or what's widely accepted, right? You're choosing that too. You choose it again and again and again. And it sounds like you're teaching your students that way of moving through a work. So what else do you do in your teaching that really encapsulates or expresses your orientation toward racial justice or anti-racism?
I feel like agency and empowerment is a huge tool. To like for them to feel like they have a voice. I think in changing what roles we're given, or like in building a work, feels like another like way of like decolonizing anti-racism. Like, what is it to experience power, and what does power have to look like? It was fascinating because at first, like, power was like, it was force. It was like, wow, like high energy. And then I was like, oh, this is interesting. In history, you know, like we force people to do this, or we like control. So I was like, oh, I think I'm imitating what I've seen. And then, you know, I got tired. And then it was like, oh, power could be my engine to be able to continue. Okay, resilience. Power can be the ability to love, to care for myself and others, like anyway. And it was like, oh, it has so many forms. And yeah, I guess in like one character in particular was like the most powerful in this storyline. And I'd say I spent 6 months like proving I was powerful. And I was like exhausted by it. And then I was like, oh, what if I just already was when I came in, like when I come in here, like I just am. And that was like shocking to me, because I was like, oh, I don't exist in this, like outside of here, like outside of this like fantasy, like this is not how I walk around the world. I have like, this is like a different way, like a different learning, a different part of me, a different aspect. And it was super exciting to like tap into that and like open it up. Yeah. And so trying to, I guess, like provide these other, there's other ways, there's like, whether it's like coming into yourself or like tapping into something new. Yeah, I'm like realizing how much also I embrace the uncomfortable. And this summer, or these other spaces I was in, we were realizing like, oh, by me taking a risk, it's helpful for someone else to see that I'm like trying this on. So then like, if they're like, I don't know what we're doing, they're like, oh, but she's trying, like let me see what that's like. Yeah, there's this like dialogue back and forth already with like, okay, I'm going to try this on, but I'm not going to say this is the one way. And then you're going to try this on, and then we'll start to exchange that and see where we can go with it. Yes, and?
Yes, and. Yes, and. I want to ask you if there's anything you wish you could have said that you haven't discussed with us yet.
It's just so meaningful to have space. It's so meaningful to have space where we can be ourselves and release. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. This has been a real pleasure.
Same for me.
Thank you for joining Race Remix today. This episode is made possible through the generous donations of our sponsors and the efforts of our team of students, staff, faculty, and community partners. If you enjoyed this conversation, listen to more episodes at raceremix.arts.arizona.edu.